and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 308, and today's date is March 7th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Tensions Between Russia and U.S. Could Rock the Economy. Because what do we actually know here? Well, we understand that the Ukraine incident was a coup. There were paid opposition forces paid by the EU and the United States government in the tune to about $5 billion to handle this situation. They went in, they started protesting, they started rioting as soon as the president of the country decided to go in the direction of Russia for their economic system. Because again, and I've mentioned this many times, they looked around, they saw how the EU was doing, they saw the countries, they were in a huge amount of debt, a lot of people had no jobs, and it seemed like there was no actual help for these countries. So they decided to side with Russia at this time. And then all of a sudden the people started to rally and protest, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we've seen, and from the taped conversations and from everything that has been happening, this was completely planned by the U.S. government, central bankers, and the EU. Why? Why was this planned? It was planned to put that country on the EU system, have them join NATO, to continually prop up the entire central banking system, to keep the U.S. dollar and the EU going by spreading debt into other countries. But now this is kind of morphed. It's kind of morphed into a U.S.-Russia Cold War battle between the superpowers. And this is what we are seeing right now. We're seeing the United States backed into a corner because they couldn't capture the entire Ukraine. The Crimea, the southern, the eastern parts of the Ukraine are held by Russia. They're siding with Russia. I shouldn't say held. They're siding with Russia, and the United States has the western part of Ukraine. So we see what is happening, and the plan will not work unless they get the entire Ukraine, and this is what they really want. So since they can't do anything at this time, they've been throwing the words like sanctions. They've been saying they're going to freeze visas, freeze bank accounts, because they have no other option at this point. They could go in with force, but again, they don't want to be shown as starting the war with Russia. So they need to create some type of false flag, or to have something happen for this to really ramp up. And right now, Russia, of course, said, listen, every time you sanction us, we're going to do the same thing right back to you. And you have to remember, you have a lot of companies in Russia, Boeing, Ford, GM. So we can really take down the United States. And you have to remember, the nations that support Russia right now hold most of the treasuries and the U.S. dollars in reserves. And if you really want to play this sanction game, what we will do is we will take the treasuries and dump them. As we are dumping them, other nations will follow suit who side with Russia. For instance, China, North Korea. And this will spread across the globe. And more of these countries will start dumping United States assets. They will start asking for their money back, and you can have your paper treasury. Now, if this happens, the United States economy would implode, because they'll be returning the U.S. dollars in the reserves, and that will flood back to the United States. This is almost like the same scenario in the Middle East if the countries decide not to sell the oil using the U.S. dollar. This money would come back to the United States, and we would see inflation. The Fed, who is tapering right now, would have to say, whoa, this is an extraordinary circumstance, and we would need to increase QE to buy up all of these treasuries. Now, they could have Belgium buy up a lot of them, but I don't believe Belgium would be able to handle the massive amount of treasuries being sold. So the Federal Reserve would have to step in and ramp up QE and create or print money like you've never seen before. This is what the Fed is continually talking about. Now, we have to understand, will this happen? We don't exactly know. The other scenario for this entire thing that could rock the economy is they could create a false flag event, because right now the polls show we do not want to go to war with Syria. We do not want to go to war with Ukraine. Most of the American people believe that we should not even be in this area. We should let Ukraine decide and do whatever they need to do inside the Ukraine. The United States should not even be a part of this. And the poll numbers are very low, and the American people will not want to go to war for the Ukraine against Russia. The only way to change this is to create a false flag event here on American soil. And we could possibly see this, and this would be an extraordinary event that would occur that would change the Fed's decision on how they are tapering at this time. So there are a lot of things in limbo right now. One little spark could set this entire system to go, and we can see that this would completely cover up the economic collapse in regards to the Fed and the United States government causing it, because it would be much easier, and it would be a lot easier to blame it on Russia and China, to say, look, hey, they started, we were imposing sanctions, we're trying to protect the people's rights in the Ukraine, even though we caused the entire incident, and they are now returning, getting rid of the treasuries and the US dollar. So they are causing this collapse on the United States, and all eyes would be off the Fed and the United States, and all eyes would be on Russia, China, and other nations. This is another possible scenario, and this is what we are seeing happening right now. Now, we all understand that this economy that we are in is an illusion. It's not real. The Fed pretty much controls everything. They control all the numbers: unemployment, GDP, inflation, the creation of money, the number of banks, the politicians. They control pretty much everything. They are in control. They control, if you like to call it, the matrix. It's an illusion that they created, and people believe that they are in this illusion and working, and everything is real, but it really is not, because it's all made up. And we can see just by the unemployment numbers that have come out, they expected 149,000, and they got 175,000, and then all of a sudden the unemployment rate rose to 6.7%. Again, kind of not making sense here at all. But what they're saying is there were 601,000 people that were unable to work because of bad weather. More Americans started looking for work but didn't find jobs. That's still an encouraging sign, because more job hunters suggest that people were more optimistic about their prospects, and the bad weather kept them in, and this number should have been a lot higher, and the unemployment would have come down, but because of the bad weather, this is why we're seeing this number. And if we look closely at who received these jobs, as we've always seen, education and health, they added about 33,000. Leisure and hospitality, 25,000. Now, this is very interesting. Temp help services, 24,000 people. Now, these aren't full-time great jobs that we're talking about. These are not jobs that are sustainable. And here, government workers, 13,000. Now, what we're seeing is a lot more of the older population are receiving the part-time work in America, because they're receiving a pension, and a lot of these companies like to give this work because they understand that the older people are more reliable. They come into work, they're satisfied with the amount that they're making because they're receiving a pension. And what we're seeing right now is that about 239,000 of the job gains fell into the older group, those aged 55 to 69, and the younger generation are not receiving those jobs. So the youth of America are having a tough time even getting the part-time work. Now we have to still just remember this, that this is a complete illusion of the system, because as reported by shadowstats.com and other executives on Wall Street and other people who've been calculating the unemployment numbers, our unemployment here in the United States is around 30 to 37%, depending on the calculation. But we are in depression numbers here. We are in a place where people really cannot make ends meet. People are losing their homes. This is why we're seeing foreclosures moving up. And again, we have had so many news, a lot of news coming out of companies laying off. Now, where are all these people going to find work, and how are they going to treat this in regards to the unemployment numbers? Because you have to remember, IBM, Dell, Wells Fargo, J.P. Morgan, I mean, they announced it, but these people are just starting to get laid off now. Staples closing stores, J.C. Penney, Macy's, they're all starting to lose their work. And again, it's getting more and more difficult to find those part-time jobs in the retail industry, in the service industry, because they're closing so many stores, and a lot of these jobs are going away, and it's making it very, very difficult to find work. Now again, as I said in my other reports, Obamacare is not doing what they really wanted it to do. It's not working out the way they wanted it to work out. Their website is a disaster. People can't, get insurance, and even if they do, the insurance is not what everyone thought it was going to be. It is a lot more expensive. The deductibles are very, very high, and you would never ever even touch the insurance because you have to meet that high deductible first. So you're actually just paying a monthly premium to have this health insurance that does nothing for you unless you're in a catastrophic situation. But in an everyday situation of just going to the doctor, you're going to pay out of your own pocket. The insurance is not even going to do anything for you. But this is not going the way they thought it was going. And a lot of people, the youth of America, they thought it was going to pay for the health insurance, and the youth of America is not paying for it, and they were hoping that they were going to get all the tax revenue from the health insurance, and it's just not working out. So they are really pushing climate change right now, and now they're pushing it as where climate change is going to enable terrorism. They're trying to scare us into climate change right now. They're trying to make us believe that the earth is getting warmer, that the seas are rising because of the melting ice caps, and the North Pole is melting. But you have to remember, do a little experiment. Put an ice cube in a glass. You have to remember the expansion and contraction of water and ice. Put an ice cube in a glass. When it melts, does your glass overflow? No, it doesn't. So as these ice caps melt, they will not overflow and the seas will not rise. Because when ice forms, it expands. When it melts, it contracts. And again, seas will not rise, and this is why we haven't been seeing any of this. And this whole notion of warmer weather is completely false, because the weather is controlled by the sun. But they're using this to convince us that climate change is going to give us food shortages, water shortages, and because people become so desperate, they're going to turn into terrorists. And the reason why they're scaring us, making us believe this, is because they want you, the American people, and people across the world, to pay a tax to keep the private Western central banks going. And again, if we look even closer into this, we can see that they are trying to scare everyone, trying to control everyone, and keep terrorism in front of us. And they're using it and expanding it and pushing this. And there was a report that came out, and they're saying, and this is what the report says: climate change poses another significant challenge for the United States and the world at large. As greenhouse gas emissions increase, sea levels are rising, average global temperatures are increasing. I thought we had the coldest winter I've ever seen, and severe weather patterns are accelerating. A warming planet will likely exacerbate water scarcity and lead to sharp increases in food costs. The report details leading to a devastated infrastructure and living conditions, especially in poor regions of the world. Well, in the United States government has not been putting the money into our infrastructure, roads, bridges, dams, all falling apart, because where is all the money going? That's right, to other countries. They're not putting it back into the United States because they can't expand the debt system within the United States, so they have to spread it around the world, so they make money on the interest with the money that they're loaning to other places. Again, this is the people of the United States. This is your money that they're using to spread across the world. And this goes on to say that these effects are threat multipliers that will aggravate stressors abroad, such as poverty, environmental degradation, political instability, and social tensions, conditions that can enable terrorist activity and other forms of violence. Now, when I hear this part of the report, I'm thinking, are they really talking about an economic collapse? That when an economic collapse happens, people will not be able to get water, people will not be able to get food, the conditions will not be livable, and people will start turning on the government, and those people will become terrorists, and then they'll have to send out their anti-terrorism force, which is DHS, to rein them in. And this is why they need the people disarmed, because if you really read into this report, you can actually read it in this fashion. So it looks like they're using this as many different angles to play on climate change to get money. They're using it for terrorism to scare you and to let you know that you are the terrorist when the collapse comes. Now, yesterday I reported on Liz Wall, and I gave you my opinion on this whole situation. This is the anchor woman on RT, Russia Today, who resigned, who said that she didn't agree with Russia Today, that they were forcing her to do and report in a certain way. And again, I said I believe that she already has another job, because usually people don't quit unless they have something lined up. And I'm sure she received a huge amount of money and probably has a great position at either CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, or one of these other networks, but she's not going to start just yet because the story just broke. It would look too obvious if she started right now. So it'll take about 2 or 3, 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden you'll see she's the anchor, co-anchor of one of these things. But she did mention something about Ron Paul, where she said that they made her report and cut out certain segments of Ron Paul to try to make it and push it in a certain way. But Ron Paul came out, and former U.S. Congressman Ron Paul responds to allegations voiced by the channel's ex-host Liz Wall that RT censored his interview. And he wanted to say that the programming yesterday, as all other ones, I thought was very fair. I listened to the replay of the whole thing, and Paul said this on his official online channel on March 6th. I didn't think it was slanted in any way. I thought what they reported was exactly what I said, he added. So we're getting a little bit of misinformation right now of what actually happened. The story's kind of falling apart at this time. And again, Liz Wall did go right on to Anderson Cooper and CNN, and I would not be surprised if she shows up in one of these high-paid networks. And if this does happen, you can see this was completely propaganda to demonize Russia, to demonize Putin, and this was all paid for by the United States. And you have to remember, the NDAA now, which was signed by President Obama, and this is the 2014 NDAA, allows the United States to propagandize the American people. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this report, the sanctioning between different governments is going on, and we see that tensions are building between Russia and the United States, and they're throwing around sanctions and banning visas, and we see the same thing happening in Venezuela at this time. Members of Congress and the Obama administration have consistently placed the blame for the violence stemming from protests on the Venezuela government, and right now, based on these assertions, momentum is building to implement sanctions on members of the Venezuelan government, and this is coming from the U.S. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz told the press on Monday that there should be sanctions on individuals. The administration is looking at those, and that we should be putting sanctions on the Venezuelan government. And we have to remember, Venezuela has a lot of oil, and the central bankers have the same goal in mind: to continually prop up the U.S. dollar in any way they possibly can. And they don't care if people die. They don't care if they pay for rebels to create riots and protests. They'll use drone strikes. It doesn't matter, as long as they get what they want, and that is to make a profit and have control over these countries and loot the natural resources of these countries, because this is really what they're doing. And right now, Venezuela has a lot of oil, and right now Maduro is selling that oil, not using the U.S. dollar. And they're probably looking at this saying, you know what, this would be a great opportunity to get in there, remove Maduro, and put all those oil reserves on the U.S. dollar, and the central bankers could prop up the dollar a little bit longer. And this is what they're doing in the Ukraine. This is what they're doing in the entire Middle East. This is why they are in Africa. This is why they are in Thailand, because they are spreading they're spreading all over the world. The empire of the United States is spread so thin at this point that it's becoming very, very difficult to hold all of this together at this time. And this goes on to say that the administration is considering sanctions, comes on the heels of demands from members of Congress that the Obama administration go further in its application of pressure on the Venezuelan government. So they're pushing pressure, and they're starting the same tactic they've been using in every single country. Now, if we go back to the Ukraine right now, China, and I mentioned this before, China is siding with Russia on sanctions. And China has come out on Russia's side, strongly condemning any sanctions. China has consistently opposed the easy use of sanctions in international relations or using sanctions as a threat. And Russia is out there, and again, they're saying, listen, if you impose sanctions, those sanctions that you put on us are going to boomerang back and hit the United States really hard. And a lot of economists, a lot of analysts are out there, and they are saying the same thing, that sanctions will not work at this time, and they will hit the United States hard, and most likely completely collapse the economy of the United States. Now, we understand, and I've been talking about this a lot, that there were snipers in the Ukraine, and there were reports from leaked recordings, and the last one was from Catherine Ashton and the Estonian Foreign Affairs Minister, that there were snipers that were firing on government, and they were also firing on the opposition and rebels. And again, they're looking into this, and now there is an investigation. Of course, Catherine Ashton is out there saying that she would like some type of investigation. It's most likely because she was caught on these recordings, and she understood and knew what was happening, and she's out there saying, we want to investigate violence and killings, we want the perpetrators to stand trial. And Russia right now is saying the same exact thing. Let's see who these snipers really are, and Russia hopes UN will help launch probe into Kiev snipers, and they want to understand what exactly happened at this point. Now, again, We can see how this is starting to morph now. Things are completely falling apart. The stories are falling apart, and you can see the United States is moving the propaganda to demonizing Russia. Russia is fighting back, and it looks like it is a United States-Russia type of battle at this point. Now, back to the Ukraine. Crimea, of course, formed its own bodies of power independent from Kiev. The Autonomous Republic of Crimea has formed its own bodies of power, independent from the authorities of the Ukraine's capital, Kiev. The autonomy has established its own ministries of justice, internal affairs, emergency situations, industrial policies, fuel and energy, and information and mass communications. Crimea has also formed its own prosecutors, offices, security services, customs tax, and many other type of services separate and apart from the Kiev government. So we can see we're starting to see a split between Crimea and the Ukraine. Now, the Ukrainian government is receiving, supposedly, aid from the EU, from the United States, receiving billions of dollars, and the Ukrainian debt for Russian gas rises to 1.89 billion, and the Ukrainian government, of course, is broke. They have no money, and they missed its February payment. And again, they're trying to sign up with the EU. They're trying to get the aid flowing into the Ukraine, and all of this is pending at this point. The aid has not, actually I should say the loans have not hit the Ukraine at this time to help with anything in the Ukrainian government. Now, since Russia supplies natural gas to Ukraine, what's happening right now is that the U.S. is planning. It's amazing how fast they can do this, where they can just, move in and say, you know what, we're going to be the suppliers now. And the U.S. is planning to replace Russia as Ukraine's main gas supplier by selling frack gas to Ukraine. America is quickly trying to pull together its plan to start exporting natural gas resources to Europe by using the Ukraine as its cash cow. The New York Times reports that the energy initiative has been on the table in the State Department since 2011, and now you see it today. So if we look back at what they have done, is they have been planning this for quite a while, because this allows them to spread the debt. This allows them to export and to keep and continually prop up the U.S. dollar. And again, this is what the central bankers do. This is exactly what they do. Now, the Navy destroyer USS Truxtun is moving into the Black Sea. It will pass through the Bosphorus Straits in Istanbul before it reaches the Black Sea. It is en route right now, and again, they're saying this was because it was scheduled. It is a training exercise, and this is why it is moving into the Black Sea. Again, I mentioned this yesterday. We saw this in Jordan, where they said, and this was back in July of 2013, they were moving all the military assets and troops into Jordan because it was a training exercise, and all of a sudden they stayed there, and then all of a sudden in August the next month we saw the false flag event. And this is how they usually play, and this is how they usually push their agenda forward and go for it. Now, in other news around the world here, let's get back to Syria. Syria right now is going to miss the deadline to destroy 12 chemical arms sites. Syria is going to miss a major deadline next week to destroy its chemical websites, and the United States State Department says, this is getting ridiculous. It seems like President Assad is stalling, and this might, put the June 30th date at risk, and they want Syria to speed this up at this point. NATO came out and said, well, you know what? Since Russia is causing all these problems in the Ukraine, NATO has suspended plans to coordinate with Russia in guarding Syria's deadliest chemical weapons as they are destroyed. The Alliance Secretary General Rasmussen on Wednesday blamed Russia's armed occupation of Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula and said, you know what, that when the specially equipped U.S. vessel sails off with 560 tons of Syrian chemical warfare agents. We do not want the Russian ship to escort it. Now, this is raising red flags to me. And it's amazing how all of a sudden this is happening when they're ready to destroy the chemical weapons. And I've said this in many, many reports where I believe that they want some of these chemical weapons to be shipped back to the United States to be used in a false flag. And without a Russian ship escorting the United States disposal ship, they do have the opportunity to do this. And again, they are trying to prepare for every type of contingency right now to get this war started, because this is what they really need, because they understand the collapse is coming. And again, their goal is the same. They don't care if it happens with Russia in the Ukraine incident. They don't care if it happens with Syria or Iran or North Korea, as long as they get some type of an event and the people of the United States go to war. Because you have to remember, if it's a Syria conflict, Russia will that will lead to Russia, because Russia backs Syria. If it's a Ukrainian conflict, boom, they're into Russia. They get to go to China. And we can see this is what they're trying to do. It doesn't matter how they do it. This is the same exact goal. And what Rasmussen was saying is, let me stress, this will not affect the destruction of the chemical weapons, but Russia will not be involved in the escort of the U.S. vessel. And again, this is raising red flags all over the place. Now, there is a report in Syria that the CIA has been working with Jordan and Saudi Arabia to train and equip 10,000 Syrians to join the Sunni revolt against the regime of President Assad. These fighters were trained by specialists from the Central Intelligence Agency in camps inside Jordan territory. The CIA wants to build a force that will consistently harass the Syrian military. In February 2014, the CIA sent more than 500 rebels trained and equipped with anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons into southern Syria. Within hours, the rebel force linked to the Free Syrian Army. The sources said the U.S. aim, coordinated with Saudi Arabia, was to send a battalion-sized rebel force that could reach the southern suburbs of Damascus. Some of the operations are expected to fail, but there might be successes as well, a source said. The sources said that the CIA wants to maintain a flow up to 1,000 rebel fighters from Jordan into Syria every 2 months. They are keeping the pressure up. They want this agenda to go forward. They need to get into Syria to put the natural resources on the US dollar, because you have to remember, Syria made a deal with Russia to extract their natural gas, and I believe this deal is for the next 25 years. So all of this natural gas and oil will not be paid for using US dollars, and the central bankers cannot let this happen. Now, there was a report, and I'm going to go back to the Ukraine right now, that Russia sank a warship to block off a port off of, and I'm going to try to pronounce this, Novozern, and they're saying that it was a Russian ship. They blew it up to block the entire area into the Danutslav Lake. And I was looking at this, and I was saying, and I don't know if you've seen pictures of this, but if you just Google it on Google and just say, the Russian warship sunk off Crimea, if you really look at it, and I decided to take a closer look at it, and they're saying this is a Kara-class cruiser. Now, this cruiser, the length of it is 568.9 feet. And if you look at I guess it's the river or the inlet from that lake, every single point in there is between 1,500 feet wide and 1,000 feet wide. So I don't know how this is going to be blocked from ships going through, because this ship that was sunk, the beam width was 60 feet. So they have more than enough room to get by. And this looks like this was propaganda, and this also came out of the Ukraine in Kiev reporting this. And I don't believe that Russia would just go out and sink one of its ships, blow it up to completely block the area, which it doesn't block at all. And if you look at the pictures, it's a very close-up shot. It doesn't show how much water they have on either side. But if you go to Google Maps and you really look at the lake and the inlet into this area, you can see it is very, very wide. And if you take the little scale on there, you can see it is wide, and this ship is not going to block this area. And again, we're seeing a lot of propaganda out there, and a lot of it is coming from the Ukrainian in the Kiev, from the opposition side. Now, again, there are tensions between Russia and the U.S., and what we're seeing come in, and this is another malware from Russia propaganda. This has been reported in Reuters, and what they're saying is they found a sophisticated piece of spyware has been quietly infecting hundreds of government computers across Europe and the United States in one of the most complex cyber espionage programs uncovered to date. Several security researchers and Western intelligence officers say they believe the malware, widely known as Turla, is the work of the Russian government. It is sophisticated malware that, linked to other Russian exploits, uses encryption and targets Western governments. It has Russian paw prints all over it. Now, of course, they don't know this for sure. They're just saying this is where they believe it's coming from. And Symantec Corp estimates up to 1,000 networks have been infected by Turla and a related virus called Agent BTZ. And hackers used the Turla spyware to establish a hidden foothold in infected networks and be called upon at any time to have other tools and other methods move and create havoc on the systems. And I also mentioned a couple of reports ago, when the whole Ukrainian incident was taking place, there was another malware that is sitting dormant on all the financial servers and sitting in all these different places where it could be called upon at any time to steal the accounts of people, to bring down the financial system. And you can see that they are preparing for something to happen, because to build this further and to have the American people say, you know what, this is ridiculous. They just brought down the power grid. They just brought down the financial institution. And they can blame this on Russia very easily. Say Russia just did this to us because Putin is evil, and we need to go in there into the Ukraine and push Russia out. And the only way to do this at this point is to force and convince the American people that the United States is being attacked by one of these countries. And again, we're looking at many, many different possibilities at this time. There are many indicators, and we have a time frame here that many things could happen, because the time frame for Syria, we have midterm elections for Assad. If the people vote him in again, it's going to be a very tough time convincing people that Assad is bad if they vote him back into office. So they have from now until June, and again, the Fed said they wanted to bring their tapering down to 0 by mid-2014, and I don't believe that this is going to happen. Every time the Fed is out there saying that something major has to happen that would disrupt the economic conditions of America, this is the second time they're saying it, and if you put all of this together, you can see what they are trying to build and the story that they're trying to create, and we definitely will see something happen during this period, because they're just not going to back off and say, okay, we tried this again, and that was it. They did it in the in Syria. They thought the American people and Congress would go for the war. They looked at the poll numbers. They saw, oh, this is terrible. We are not going to be able to pull this off. They're doing this in the Ukraine. They're looking at the poll numbers. They are very low. Only 14% believe we should even be in the Ukraine. And they've learned their lesson, and they know what they have to do. They have to bring it back to the United States to convince and have the American people beg to go into these countries and to start World War III. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.